All right, and we are up and we are recording. Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. I hope everyone had a good Easter if you celebrate Easter yesterday. I know it was very different for a lot of us because everyone was home, right? Usually we personally get together with family and whatnot, and we just did all of that, but from our houses yesterday. So it was good. I hope everyone else had a great day as well. And I wanted to kind of dive right in. First, just this topic today goes in line with a couple of the things that I recently started on social media, which a lot of you use social media, some of you don't, but there is a page called Meet NAVAN that I started where people are going to start sharing their stories. If you are someone, I think I did, if you're a director and above, just as sort of an incentive for people to get to that status, you can share your story in that page and then share with your friends. So where I'm going with this, today's topic is going to be on storytelling, the art of storytelling. Now, there are many books out there about this topic. I have never read any of them. I'm just being honest. I love personal development books, especially those that help me with my business, podcasts and things like that. But this is not a topic that I feel like I ever really needed help learning and how to do or what to do or whatnot. Because even before I met Kyle, and Kyle would always, if any of you know Kyle or have been coached by Kyle, or I mean, he's always very adamant about just share your story, just share your story, just share your story. Even before Kyle and I started working together, I feel like I was already, it's one of those things that I was already doing. If I, you know, even if I didn't know what it was called or more or less had a title for it, so to speak. And so today, obviously, we're going to talk about sharing your story. The reason I'm bringing up this topic, we actually had something different planned today, but last week I must have been in a handful of conversations and I must have trained in a few different teams with people on sharing their story. And I don't care what platform you're using, if you're using social media, if you're using picking up the phone, if you are using home parties, which I hope none of you are right now because we are social distancing. But, you know, a couple months ago, if you were using coffee shop days or whatever it is, right? The whole game, so I don't even know what to call it, is just sharing your story. The person that shares their story with the most people wins. Where I feel like people are getting hung up on is there are a lot of people that are just getting started that feel like they don't have a story. And you don't have to let me see or anything, but how many of you, raise your hands right now, none of us can see you. How many of you feel like, well, my story's not as good as hers, so I'd rather just have her tell her story. Or I don't have a great product testimony yet. Or I don't have any kind of rags to riches story yet. Or I've been enrolled for 3 months and I'm just now starting to, build my business because of circumstances or whatever. And I haven't even gotten a manager yet. I haven't had any success yet, whatever it is, right? I talked to someone who's not personally on my team. She's in a totally different sideline team. I think it was the day before yesterday. And she wanted to quit, to give up because she didn't feel like she had a story yet. She's like, people don't, I don't have success to share. And where I'm going with this and where I'm rambling is that people don't care. I'm just going to be honest. If you have an amazing story and you have some story that, you've been in network marketing for an extended amount of time and you've done really well and you were able to, get in a different tax bracket or whatever else, like that's amazing too. But your people are going to resonate with you and your story for whatever that is. So me personally, I've been in this industry for 5 years, and that whole 5 years is brought me to this point. So that is more or less, it has a lot to do with the story that I talk to other people about when I'm sharing why I get into network marketing, what made me stay, what made me leave, what made me switch companies, and what brought me here, right? Kyle, over a decade of experience, and he has a very long story as well. And he'll obviously talk about his story, but we all know Kyle's story, right? How many of us can say that he's a 35, I can't even say everything that he does, psychologically unemployable, whatever his story is, right? Like, go ahead, Kyle. I see.
The funny part about that is everybody's heard my story 8,000 times, and still nobody can say 35-year-old psychologically unemployable retired rock and roll drummer.
Just that.
It's so funny, but it's true. But you guys know it, right? Anyway, keep going, Chrissy. I'm sorry.
Yes, we all know Kyle's story, right? So whether you can say the title of his story or not, we know his story. We know the story of him being in an airport and seeing his daughter run to him and him missing first birthdays and whatever else, right? Because we've heard it so many times and it's impactful. But your story doesn't have to be 10 years of experience, or doesn't have to be like mine where, I hope it's not like mine, where my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and I said, no, I'm not working in a hospital anymore. I want to be home with her, right? Your story is your story. And if you guys have looked at the social media pages, the corporate pages, the NAVAN for Life Instagram page or the NAVAN Life Facebook page, why am I having issues with social media words today? Words are hard. Anyway, usually when I interview someone and I highlight someone's story, it's 3 points, right? And for those of you, I see lots of familiar faces that I've interviewed because we have so many great stories here, but it's usually before, during, and after. Before I get into that, I wanted to just share something that those stories are more impactful than any product information, than any ingredient information, than any science, than anything, because people partner with people, right? So if you personally feel like you don't have a story that's as good as someone else's, it doesn't matter. If you're just getting started in network marketing and maybe you've never done this before and you don't really have what you personally feel like is a long story yet, or any kind of story, it doesn't matter, because what people are looking for is they're looking for excitement. They're listening to you and they're talking to you because they want to know why you're doing this. You can absolutely share other people's stories if you feel like they'll resonate. If you know a nurse, you can, share my story with them. And that's what that Meet NAVAN page is for. Myself and some other people were starting to share, and we're starting to kind of build up the community in that page. Please invite your people if you'd like to. But if you see someone's story that resonates with someone that you can by all means share that story with them, right? From social media. And where I'm going with this is when I encourage people that I'm coaching, or even when I'm interviewing people for those, the Testimony Tuesdays that we have when we highlight stories, it's before, during, and after. And what I mean by that, and this is just how I do things, Kyle may have some different insight, but it's before NAVAN, and then what brought you to NAVAN, that's the during, right? And the after part is always what you're excited about moving forward, right? So it's none of us have any kind of rags to riches story just of yet, right? This company has not been around long enough for anyone to have, I personally feel like my life has changed. I'm looking at some familiar faces, Pam and Tony and Angie. Like, I'm sure all of us can agree that our lives are very different in the last several months since we've been here, but that's just part of your story. The after part, so to speak, and I'm putting up air quotes, is where you're going from here, right? So the before is where you were at before NAVAN. Whether you were in a different network marketing company, whether you weren't, whether you were looking for something like this, whether it just fell in your lap, like whatever it is, the before, right? The during is what brought you here. What got you to say yes? Was it a person? Was it someone else's story? Was it a product? Was it whatever? Was it Trey's vision? Was it because you like Chick-fil-A? Like, whatever the reason is that you said, yes, I want to enroll. I want to be a part of this. And let's go do this, right? That's the during. And then the after is what you're excited about moving forward, what you've felt thus far, and what your vision is personally for the future. And when you're sharing this with someone, that's going to be far more impactful than any science that you can give them about our daily detox, than any promo or sale, or you can, a COA about our CBD or whatever it is, right? If you're talking to someone about a product, then yes, products will help, right? But if you're talking to business builders, they want to partner with you because they want to partner in business with you, right? Think about a job interview. How many times have you been in a job interview? It's stories, right? There's yes, where do you see yourself in 10 years and like all of that kind of stuff, but that's essentially what this is. So if you don't feel like you have a story, and you don't feel like your story is any, can compare to anyone else's, just talk about that. Talk about the fact that, like, hey, listen, I just got started, or I've been enrolled for 3 months and I'm just now deciding that I need to give this some time and attention, like whatever it is, right? I was talking to someone, what was it, on Friday, I think, with a different pocket of team, and she has a very similar situation, I don't know what to call it, right, as someone else on her team. And I see Tony in here. I don't know if the person who I'm talking about is in here. But anyway, I'm just going to go. And she basically said, well, I feel like I don't have a story as good as hers, or something like that. And I was like, whoa, 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 right? Like, your story is your own. So whatever you feel, and I'm rambling here, I'm sorry. Whatever you feel like is the reason that brought you to NAVAN, share that with people. Share that excitement with people, because that's what people are going to see, and that's what they're going to resonate with, right? And they're going to want to be a part of it too. So it doesn't have to be that you had some great product testimony, or you were able to get off medication, or whatever it is. It's just what brought you here and where you're going forward, and why you want that person to partner with you and do it with you, right? That's the storytelling process. All right, I feel like I'm rambling at this point, so I'm gonna shut up and let Kyle kind of take over, because this is definitely his thing.
You are not rambling at this point, because it's dead on the money. It's gosh, guys, I cannot express the importance of this, you know, and it does. Christy, when some of the things you just said that we've all heard, you know, I know you and I have heard it a lot, and I know a lot of other people here, like, I don't feel like my story is as good as theirs, or you know, I don't have a story yet, I'm brand new. And it's just like, you know, baloney. Yes, you do, you know. And that is, I keep reading the comments that are popping up, you know, people by people, and feelings over facts and figures, and it's just, this is all the truth, guys. Look at the information you're getting here, and your story is your story, and it's as real as it gets. And you guys have heard my story 18,000 times. And guess what? If you show up tomorrow, same time, same place, you'll hear the same thing. I promise you. You know, and I laugh sometimes when, yeah, okay, how many of you guys have done this? Hey, you know, I want to get so-and-so on the phone because, you know, they're really good with the business. You know, hey, I've got this guy that I think, you know, you would, he's really into the detox, Kyle, and I know you're really into the detox. I'd love for you to connect with him. Or this or that, or whatever the case is, right? We've all said that. Oh, I want to get, you know, you on the phone with so-and-so because of this or because of that. And, you know, the funniest part to me is that you put me on the phone with that guy, and guess what I do? I tell my story. Exactly the same as I told it the night before. Or, you know, oh, well, I want you to talk to this guy, or you want this person because of product or whatever. And then they get on the phone and then they tell their story. There's a reason for that. You guys, in my story, there's something that I've talked about many, many, many times. I said that, you know, I flew out to Florida, and for the first time, I really got to partner up with somebody who taught me how to go build this business and to simplify things. And guys, you know that's Trey, right? You've heard the story 1,000 times. And I talk about simplifying the business and how to make it easy and what makes it go, right? Now, besides the mechanics of a quote unquote comp plan and figuring out one behavior, the one thing I was taught to do by Trey was share my story. All he said was share your story. Tell your story. Tell your story. And if you guys remember, to this point in my story, what am I? I'm a failed network marketer that was losing my house, right? I had nothing. I had no proof. I had zero. I had no validation whatsoever to give to anybody that I was going to succeed at building this business. But all Trey said was share your story. And what do you think? Do you think I thought the same things that a lot of you guys have said? Some of the things that Christy was saying, like, you know, my story's not good enough, or I don't have the proof yet. I don't have the success. That's exactly what I thought. But I just said, okay, I'll share my story. I'll tell it. I'll share my story. And guess what happened? It went boom. But here's what I learned. I learned to start using other people's stories with my story. I started to, you know, tell the story of the whole situation. Now, what Christy was saying a second ago is dead on the money. Life like before. See, here's what I always say. What was your life like before? Why did you get started? What is your life like now? Now, the difference with now is maybe you just got started in the business. So it is, where are you going? What do you see for the future? The vision, etc., right? But the most important piece is what was your life like before? And really, why did you get started? You guys have heard me ask you this question. You know, people will say, well, what do I go tell somebody? And I'll say, well, you know, I can't tell you what to, you know, tell somebody. I'll say, why did you get started? Christy, what got you excited? Why did you get started? And then they tell me, and I say, go tell them that. Go tell them exactly that. And why? Because again, it's a story. It always is a story. Everything I talk about, everything I train on, everything I do in this business is a story. Because I learned, again, that people don't want to be sold and pitched, right? And if you tell a story, if you have a conversation with somebody, you're never selling and pitching. So learning to tell those things of why you got started, what got you excited, why are you, like the vision of this company, the future of your business, that's exciting. And if you share that, people catch that vision, right? We talk about being contagious and having your excitement and all of that being so contagious, it passes it passes to other people, right? Like your belief is so big that people are like, I don't know what this guy's on or what this guy has, but I want it. And the way to get that, guys, is by sharing your story and to well, oh my gosh, I just get so fired up about this. Like, I wish you guys could just see it, see exactly what I'm talking about, because each and every one of you have these stories, right? And so I talked about banking off of, other people's stories, or using other people's stories, or the story of the whole situation here, right? The whole NAVAN, like the whole vision, that's all a story. How you ended up here is a story. And I always talk about that too with people. I say, okay, well, tell me, like, how did you get started? What happened? Well, tell that story. If you feel like you don't have the credibility yet, or, again, let's back up to the situation Christy was talking about earlier of, well, my story's not good enough, or I don't have the success yet. Use somebody else's story. Can you tell my story? Can you tell Christy's story? Can you tell Pam's story? Can you tell whoever's story? It doesn't matter. Like, we know the stories. Now, we could tie this in, Christy, obviously, to a lot of things about, connecting somebody on three-way calls and all of that.
I'm going to, yes, we will. I want to interrupt real quick.
Please jump in.
So for those of you that have heard my story, a big part of my story is I met Kyle, right? And what Kyle just said is that a big part of his story, right, is Trey. So even years in, our stories are impacted, and they a big chunk of them is other people's stories, right? It's Kyle met Trey, and Trey's story was he was an investment banker and like whatever else, right? Like, so that's still a big chunk of whatever it is. Like, where I'm going with this is most likely the reason that you got started was because of someone else's story. So when you're sharing your story with other people, it can be like and I think we all right now are writing our stories in the circumstances or whatever it is that we're in with this, having to be at home and losing jobs and whatever else. So a big part of everyone's story right now that you're writing yourself is the fact that you realized you needed another stream of income, or you were laid off, or whatever else. And then your friend so-and-so, I'm looking at a lot of people, like Rachel as an example. When I shared Rachel's story, a big part of her story was her friend Natalie, right? And it was that. So use that as a part of your story. It's okay. It doesn't have to be singular, just you, right? A big part of it is who is it impacted you, and what made you say yes. It's most likely someone else's story. So by all means, share that while you're sharing your story with other people too.
Absolutely. And the thing is, guys, it's really, really easy to build your business with a story, because you don't ever have to really learn anything else, right? We talk about when you hop on the phone with people, or you're talking to somebody and you're in a conversation and listening. Now, here's the only thing that'll ever vary in my story is maybe where I start my story, right? I haven't talked about this in a long time, but I used to say my story was 3 parts. And I used to, say it was just ABC. Let's just call it ABC. If we divided my story into 3 sections, it was ABC. I always told A, B, and C, but I might have told it in a different order. I might go B, A, C, or I might go C, B, A. Like it doesn't, sometimes after listening to a person, I might start at a different point in my story, but I always tell the full thing. And because, well, that I guess that's the piece that comes with experience, right? Over and over and over and over and over, listening to people, but I always share the same exact story. The difference between today and backing up 10 years is, my name's Kyle. I'm a 25-year-old psychologically unemployable retired rock and roll drummer. My name's Kyle. I'm a 27-year-old psychologically unemployable retired rock and roll drummer. You guys remember a month ago, it was kind of a joke when I was like, I'm a 35-year-old psychologically unemployable. That's the first time I got to say that, or the second time I got to say, like, because it's kind of a joke to me, because that's the only piece in my story that changes, because my story hasn't changed over the years at all. The pieces are exactly the same, but fortunately I've been able to add to my story, and add a little bit more to my story, and add a little bit more to, over and over and over, not change my story ever. My story is my story. And I'm going to make a point that I probably should never talk about on this call, but you guys know I've been in a handful of other companies, right? And we've built in other things, and we've been successful in everything we built. And people will be like, well, dude, I just don't get it. Like, how have you been able to go from one company and go to another one and still succeed? I'm like, I just tell my story. But the story changed. No, it didn't. The story doesn't change at all. The story is exactly the same as it was. There is not a smidge of difference, because all I'm going to do is tell my story. That's it. And guys, that's been the secret, if you will, of my success, is telling my story. Now, here's the funny part. Not the funny part. Here's the thing that I know some of you are going to be challenged on. Is you're like, well, I don't pick up the phone. I don't do Zoom meetings. I don't do things the way you do. And that is fine. It's totally cool. You guys know that these trainings and these talks and the things that come from me, I give you my opinions, right? And I give you the things that have worked for me. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you. It doesn't mean it's the right way or the only way. It's just the stuff that I know to work for me. You know, there's some people on this, I keep looking at names, right? Of course, there are some people here right now that I know got started on the social media train. Now they do things a little bit different. They're picking up the phone and they're working it more like I work it. But there are people here that have done an incredible job of using social media to tell their story. You know, they're not pitching a product. Well, maybe they are, but they're tying it into their story. You know, they're not sitting here pitching comp plans and this and that on social media and just making a billboard sales ad. What they're doing is telling their story. And I'm not going to say names here, but these people have won, and they're winning in this business continuously, telling their story on social media through the story section, through some posts. They tell blurbs of their life of what it used to be like and then now what it is like. And then when they have the opportunity to connect with somebody, they tell them why they did this and why they got started. And then I'll notice a different social media post, you know, a couple days later, this and that, of why they got started. It's amazing that some people have figured out how to use social media to tell the exact same story. Now, how do you do that? I don't know. Let's just be real. You don't want me to give you any social media advice. But the thing is, guys, is there's a way to share your story. You know, and if you can follow the 3 simple like guidelines, what was your life like before? Why did you get started? And what is your life like now? Or what is the vision? Where are you going? You're going to win. And get really good at telling that story over and over and over and over. And if we can back up again, I'm going to tell you that point when I told you that I partnered up with Trey almost 10 years ago now. He taught me how to share my story. And guys, you know that I had nothing to offer and I had no proof again, right? I had nothing that said I was going to be a successful network marketer. But I had my story and I banked off of what we were going to do. I banked off that I just partnered up with this guy that was extremely successful in this industry. And he was going to take this little company that really nobody knew about and blew it up. And I got to be one of the first people there, and I want you to do it with me. And what does that mean? I don't really know, but you know what? We're at the top of one of them deals, and I'm going to go do it. That's where my story used to end, because I didn't know anything about it. You know, like I didn't, that's where my story had evolved to. You guys knew the rock and roll drummer part, and I told about how I was struggling, and then I met this guy, you know, and the only difference is I'm not saying 10 years ago I met this guy. I was saying I met this guy about 6 months ago, 4 months ago, 3 months ago, a year ago. And this guy was a top 5 income earner in this other company. And this guy had done that. And this guy, like, telling his story. He was an investment banker before he got into this industry. And I don't know why, but I clicked with this guy, and he kind of took me under his wing. And now we went to this other little company. And my point is, guys, I banked on his story. Now, every single one of you is connected to somebody here, right? We're all connected in one way, shape, or form here. And you can tell that same exact story of that same exact guy, the same exact way I tell it, the same way Christy tells it, the same way Pam and Brooklyn and everybody here, right? Dave, we all can tell that same story. That story is enough credibility. That story has enough validation. Just add your pieces to it. Add why you chose to join that story. You know, people, I get it all the time. Oh, I gotta work on writing my story. I'm like, no, you don't. You just gotta go open your mouth. Like, this isn't something you need to sit down and write out. Yeah, you could jot down some bullet points if you want to try and remember them, but at the same time, guys, it's your story. You shouldn't have to think of anything, right? You shouldn't. You should not have to think of anything. This is who you are. This is why you got started. The reason you got started is different than the reason I got started. Your vision for where this thing is going is probably mine. It's probably Kirsty's. That's the same. That's the story. You just got to attach yourself to it and use the credibility of all the other pieces to make your story bigger and to make your story more exciting. Because at the end of the day, people buy people. So do they buy the story you're selling? So hopefully that makes sense. Kirsty, I had another point that I wanted to bring up and I totally forgot what it was. So I'm going to hand it back over to you for a minute.
I saw Neil Roth on here and he shared an amazing.
Hey, why not? Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
I think we're all just going to start saying, why not? Neil, that was an amazing story yesterday. If you aren't in the Meet NAVAN Facebook page, please go find it on Facebook. It is not team specific. It is open to whoever. I have the page as public right now, but Neil shared an amazing story. And, you know, again, a big chunk of his story was Kyle and Trey, right? And he's been successful and he for I forget how many years, right? But a big chunk of his story is still other people, right? And you know, Kyle told me about this and I you know, knew Trey and I forget exactly what Neil's story was, but it was amazing. And it was, you know, I think we're all going to start saying, why not? And everyone's going to share that story a lot. But I think that part, if you can resonate with that, right? That part of your story, at least in the beginning, right? And maybe 10 years in still, like Kyle's, right? Is going to have a big chunk of why you got started is most likely someone else's story. You know, for me, it was, I didn't think anyone really made money in these things, but a friend of mine shared me, and that friend, right, is still part of my story. Even 5 years later, she shared with me a different way of doing things, right? And shared with me it didn't have to do in-home parties with bucket loads of inventory in my trunk. Like that wasn't necessarily, you know, the direct sales side that I thought network marketing wasn't necessarily how you had to do things, and so on and so forth. I think another thing I wanted to mention with Kyle talking about he doesn't know how people share their story in social media. If you are someone that solely uses social media, you're already doing it, because I know if you're successful with social media, you have to be sharing your story in some way, shape, or form. And I think a good example of this is you would never go on your Facebook wall and write about, well, maybe you would. I mean, I sometimes do, about the ingredients of our gummies and, you know, this and that, and you know, NAVAN's name, I mean, like all like the facts and the figures or whatever else. If you look at the people, let's use Lighty Lightner, right? She's not on these calls, but I know a lot of her team is. If you go to her page, what does she share? She shares Trey's vision. She shares the fact that, you know, what brought her out of retirement, right, of network marketing. Like those are the things on social media, right? So I'm using her as an example just because she's very prevalent and only uses social media. That's a very good example of she's still sharing her story. She's just doing it in a different way than what we're used to doing, which is picking up the phone and getting in conversations, because that's what works for us. Another thing Kyle mentioned, I just wanted to reiterate, and then I'll kind of stop rambling today. I'm very passionate about this subject, if you haven't noticed, is that my story personally changed, a big portion of it changes, I guess, as I've grown in this industry. Whereas if those of you who know my story, initially I wanted to be home and be able to help my mom, right? I wanted to be home with my mom and, you know, not working in a hospital because she had a cancer diagnosis, and I wanted to be able to bring her to her chemo treatments, whatever else. My mom passed away last year. Like that's no longer I mean, it's still a big part of my story as to why I got started. But then for those of you who don't know, over the summer, I started nursing again. I went back to nursing and hated it. And Kyle can attest to this. I guess I'm unemployable now because I hated having a job again. I hated having a boss and someone telling me when I needed to go to lunch and what time I had to be somewhere. And like, I don't want to go back into that ever again. I got a very small taste, or I guess 5 years of a taste of what it was like working for myself and being on my own schedule and not having to miss kid events and being able to go to lunch with my kids at school whenever I wanted to, and, you know, create my own schedule and design my life, right? And live by design. I always preach about that. So when I went back to nursing for a few short months. I hated it. That's now part of my story. So you're continuously going to be adding things to your story. But like Kyle was mentioning, it doesn't really change, so to speak. What got you started in this industry, in NAVAN, is what it is. And you'll always tell that part, but you'll definitely, as you go through, be adding parts to it. I think a good example is a lot of us get started initially for us, right? And I know Kyle can agree with this, and many other leaders on this call. Initially, we get into this for wanting to get our family out of whatever, right? It's something financially usually for us, or we see a vision in someone else, whatever else. But as you develop into a leader, it makes this shift where all of a sudden you get a taste of what it's like helping other people. And by all means, when I see people that I helped get started open big checks or see them be successful, I think Angie's on here is a great example. Seeing Angie on stage winning an award was far more impactful for me than it was me being on stage winning an award. You know, so when you start helping other people, that's going to be part of your story. So your story will always be changing. You're not changing, but you'll always be adding things to it. But it is what it is. You know, it's not ever the beginning part of it, and why you got started and why you said yes is not ever going to change. So, all right. Do you have anything else to add, Kyle?
Well, I don't. And I think we can wrap it up with one simple thing, guys. If you were on last week's call with Trey, to our company, our update call, Trey told you to go do one thing, and that's go tell the world, I joined NAVAN because, tell your story. It's that simple. I joined NAVAN because, tell your story. Guys, I challenge all of you, go tell that story. I joined NAVAN because. There's a reason he told everybody that. I promise. It's essentially the exact same thing he told me when we went out and started this together a long time ago. Dude, why are you doing this? All right, go tell people that. And I did. You guys know the story. You know the story. I was coachable. I listened. And it got me exactly where I am today. So I challenge all of you to go share that story. I joined NAVAN because. So with that being said, I don't have anything else to add, Kirsty. I think we've talked a lot about sharing your story and the importance of it and why, right? I think we have. Just practice. Get really good at telling your story, guys, over and over and over and over and over again. Sometimes does it get pretty routine? Yep. But guess what? It's what works. And it's your story. And it's exciting. No matter what you think, someone wants to hear your story. I promise you, somebody wants to hear your story. So go share it. Love you guys. Have an amazing Monday. Let's go absolutely kill this week. And let's share our story more than we've ever shared it. Why not? I mean, why not? Right, Chrissy? Why not, Neil?
Why not? Thank you, Neil, for that. I love that.
Yeah.
Why not?
So, guys, if you haven't seen that story from yesterday, go to the page, watch the story, watch Neil Ross' story. I mean, why not? All right, guys, have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Love you guys. If you need anything, as always, reach out.